On this vote, the yeas are 427, the nays are 1. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's get right to it. The first thing we're going to talk about, as usual, is Venezuela. There's a lot going on in Venezuela right now, so I want to make sure that I keep you guys informed of everything that's happening there. The latest thing that happened was that Secretary Rubio said that the United States is going to designate El Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization. That just simply means that that designation formalizes the whole process when it comes to the attacks that they've been conducting on those boats. Now, they're technically conducting those attacks on a foreign terrorist organization. Now, as far as what the president can do additionally with that designation, nothing really changes. The president still has the same authorities that he had previously. You know, when it comes to change in Venezuela, it's not so much a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I think if the opposition leaders are smart, which I believe they are very, very smart, I think what they need to start looking at is what their 24-hour plan is. What is their 48-hour plan? What is the plan for the next month, the next 6 months, so on and so forth. And I think the reason why that's important is because all the institutions within Venezuela have been destroyed. The judicial system has been destroyed. Law enforcement has been destroyed. The military is corrupt and has been destroyed. All these things need to be repaired by the opposition in a way that's going to allow the government to make progress in the future. That's something that they need to look forward to and be ready for that. You know, that's going to take a lot of time, money, and effort. But you know one thing that Venezuela is going to have a lot of once the Maduro regime is out of there? Money. And I think Maduro understands that he's on borrowed time right now. So he's even willing to talk to President Trump. Listen to this.
We may be having some discussions with Maduro, and we'll see how that turns out. They would like to talk.
Now, let's not get that confused. When President Trump is talking about having a discussion with Maduro, it's not going to be a friendly discussion. The discussion is most likely going to be about his exit strategy. How long is it going to be before you leave, and what does that actually look like? That is what President Trump is going to talk to Maduro about. It's regime change. This administration right now is not going to fall for the same tricks that the previous administration did. Remember, President Biden had two of his nephews who were already charged and in jail, and he also had his henchmen in jail. And the Biden administration let them go in exchange for a promise that free and fair elections were going to be held. That was ridiculous. We knew, anybody knows, anybody that's from Latin America knows that free and fair elections are never going to happen as long as Maduro is in power. But I think Maduro is going to continue to believe that his military has any type of chance against the most powerful military in the history of man, which is the current military of the American people. But Maduro can continue thinking what he wants. Right now, we are in his neighborhood. But once it comes to his front door, I think the military is going to retreat. I don't think the military is going to want anything to do with American firepower, especially in the air. Listen to James Story, a former U.S. ambassador to Venezuela.
What we have here is something that is obviously overwhelming amount of force for that mission, and an overwhelming amount of force even for the Venezuela problem set. The issue here, the Venezuelans, do they have the ability to go toe-to-toe with the United States? Absolutely not. I highly doubt any Venezuelan pilot will enter one of their Sukhoi fighter bombers they have from Russia and go up against F-35s or the F-18s off the Gerald Ford, for that matter.
Look, I'm sure Maduro has a lot of people talking to him right now, telling him that he's on borrowed time. But you know who's also on him, telling him not to leave? The cartels. Because they know that once Maduro is out of power, the United States is going to have a lot of influence in the country. However, I understand how Latin America works. The corruption is rampant. The corruption in Latin America runs in its blood. There's a ton of nepotism, cronyism, corruption within government itself. So I hope the opposition takes a different direction than what most of Latin America is like right now. Now, the United States will continue to strike these drug boats. Take a look at the latest video. Now, like I've said before, I just don't understand why people don't believe that these are drug boats and that we verified that they're drug boats. The intelligence assets that we have, that we utilize, that I've utilized, these things can see very clearly from 10,000 feet. They can see clearly what it is that you have on that boat and who's on that boat. And let me tell you, we have surveillance all over these factories as well. Look at these boats. Does that look like they're carrying baby food and diapers? They're carrying drugs. And to the media that continues to say, well, we haven't been able to verify that, we don't have the information. Of course you don't have the information. That is top secret information that they have. That's intelligence. They're not going to share that with the media, and they have no obligation to do so. So the media can continue to say, well, we can't verify that these are actually drug boats. Well, first of all, use your eyes and take a look at that boat, and you can see that it is clearly drugs on that boat. All these fishermen understand what's going on in the seas right now. Do you think that they're going to go out there, especially with all these engines? And I know there are people that are also wondering, well, how effective are these strikes? They've been very effective. As a matter of fact, listen to President Trump talk about that.
You know, there's almost no drugs coming in through our waterways anymore. Isn't it down like 85%?
It is, sir. Absolutely.
I don't know who the 15% would be.
Yep.
It wouldn't be you.
No, that's for sure.
No, I think it's been...
Tons and tons.
You would say that's a big signal.
Absolutely.
We have almost no drugs coming into our country by the sea, by, the waterways. And you know why, okay? I mean, it's pretty obvious.
That's right. You guys heard that correctly. 85% reduction in drugs coming in through the waterways. 85% reduction. And I heard Senator Jimenez use an analogy that was absolutely perfect for this situation about people being angry with these strikes. But before we go to that clip, listen to how Jake Tapper asks Senator Jimenez why we are striking those Venezuelan drug boats and why we are so interested in Venezuela if Venezuela is not the main producer of those drugs.
So President Trump said this afternoon that his beef with Maduro was primarily because of drugs. We should note Venezuela is not the primary producer of cocaine in the region, nor does Venezuela mass produce fentanyl and opioids that are killing so many tens of thousands of Americans. So why Venezuela if the reasoning behind this, the casus belli, is drugs?
So the reason is because he's a legitimate ruler of Venezuela, but also a lot of the drug trafficking actually goes through Venezuela from Colombia, and so there's a close relationship between the Venezuelan shippers and the Colombian producers, and that's how this stuff gets into the United States. And so,
a lot of these guys call themselves journalists, but they ask some of the dumbest questions I've ever heard. Why is he asking that question? Why are we dealing with Venezuela instead of Colombia, who produces 70% of the world's cocaine? Well, that's obvious. That's because Colombia has a democratically elected president. Do we have suspicions that he is tied to the cartels? Of course we do. But he is a democratically elected president. If the United States engaged in any type of kinetic action against Colombia, the Colombians would be up in arms. We can't do that. Remember, Venezuela has an illegitimate leader. That is why we are after Venezuela. Remember last year, the elections, he lost them by 70%. But enough about Jake Tapper. Let's listen to Senator Jimenez talk about that analogy that I mentioned to you guys previously. That makes perfect sense when you really think about it. Listen to this.
look, let's give you an example. Suppose that was an ISIS boat filled with explosives heading into the United States. Will anybody have any problem with us blowing it up? Well, the fact is that those drugs that those boats are carrying have the killing capacity far greater than a boat filled with explosives. And so everybody's hung up about, oh, it's drugs, it's not explosives. Hey, the drugs have killed a lot more far more Americans than any explosives have. And so, yeah, again, I applaud President Trump in the action that he's taken.
Listen, I know a lot of people don't think about it like that, but think about it like that. We're talking about drugs that can kill hundreds of thousands of Americans, sometimes millions of Americans. Yet we have an issue with the United States military blowing those boats up. And before we move on, let's listen to Senator Jimenez school Jake Tapper again on how cocaine is a carrier drug. And it's just as important that we eliminate the influx of that to the United States as it is eliminating fentanyl and other drugs.
But just to be clear, aren't the drugs that are killing so many Americans fentanyl and opioids, not so much cocaine?
Yeah, but they're the carriers, okay? No, actually it's the carrier drug. So the fentanyl is actually mixed in with the cocaine and other drugs, and that's what's killing Americans. You look like one grain of fentanyl can kill you. You get 10 pounds of fentanyl, it'll kill you. I don't know how many millions of people. And so,
one of the things I don't think we discuss enough is the fact that China produces 97% of the precursor chemicals that are used for these drugs. Now, this is the kicker. These products, these precursor chemicals, are illegal in China. You cannot sell them there, but you can export them. In other words, you can export the poison to other countries, but you cannot utilize those in yours. And if you guys remember, this is one of the discussion items that President Trump had with President Xi last time they met. And it was part of their negotiations when it came to both our economies. I don't think this drug against the cartels is going to end in Venezuela. I think there's going to be an expansion of that. How big the expansion is going to be, we're going to have to wait and see exactly what the president is going to do. But listen to what the president says when he's asked about expanding elsewhere.
Colombia has cocaine factories where they make cocaine. Would I knock out those factories? I would be proud to do it personally. I didn't say I'm doing it, but I would be proud to do it because we're going to save millions of lives by doing it.
Would you only do it with Mexico's permission, though?
I wouldn't answer that question. I've been speaking to Mexico. They know how I stand. We're losing hundreds of thousands of people to drugs. So now we've stopped the waterways, but we know every route. We know every route. We know the addresses of every drug lord. We know their address. We know their front door. We know everything about every one of them. They're killing our people. That's like a war. Would I do it? I'd be proud to. I'd probably go into Congress and say, hey, and you know what? The Democrats and the Republicans would both agree.
When it comes to Mexico, I think President Sheinbaum needs to utilize the United States to eliminate those cartels within her country. I'm telling you right now, the Mexicanos are getting frustrated. There is too much death and destruction that's happening within their borders without any type of government assistance to take out these narcos. Look, this is the same thing that's happening in Colombia. We understand that cocaine production, when Petro took over, went up by 60% the first year, over 50% the second year. We know that the cartels in Mexico are closely tied to the political structures within Mexico. So we know exactly why the president doesn't want to take action against these cartels. And those that take action against the cartel end up like this.
Massive protests breaking out in Mexico City. More than 100 police officers were injured in these violent clashes outside of the National Palace. The unrest follows the assassination of a mayor who had criticized Sheinbaum's approach to fighting drug cartels. Demonstrators, many of them Gen Z, accused the president of ignoring cartel violence and rejecting U.S. help to combat it.
So this is what happens to those that speak up, not just against the cartel, but against the president herself. The people of Mexico are asking for help. La gente de México están pidiendo ayuda. The best thing that the president can do is allow the United States to go in there, or at least share intelligence with us and allow us to go in there and engage in partnered operations to take out these cartels. It's what the Mexican people are demanding. It's what should happen. These cartels are intensifying their tactics against the people, against the military, against law enforcement agencies, and the president needs to take action. These are the types of things that are happening right now in Mexico, the type of tools that the cartels are utilizing, not only against law enforcement, but against the people themselves who dare to speak up. Take a look at this. That's right, those were drone attacks against targets of interest for the cartel. And you're telling me that the government of Mexico is doing everything they can to prevent that from happening. So let's move on to our next story, which is the Epstein files. The Epstein story has taken over media. It has taken over social media. It has taken over everything. And the House has acted. Congress has acted. They just passed a bill to release all the documents from the Epstein files. And only one congressman voted against it.
On this vote, the yeas are 427, the nays are 1. 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Only Republican Congressman Clay Higgins voted against, citing that he was afraid for the safety and security of the people's names who were in the files. That's absolutely nonsense. That's absolutely ridiculous. He needed to read the room and understand that the majority was voting for it. He should have voted for it as well. I think this is the right move. I think this should have been done a long time ago. And I just don't understand why President Trump has fought tooth and nail to try to keep these things from being released. Now, I'm going to talk to you about whether I think he's guilty or not here in a second. But I think President Trump really should have listened to Bill O'Reilly with the advice that he gave them about releasing the Epstein files. Listen to this.
Look, it's such a confusing mess. I can't even speculate about it. When I spoke with the president, I reported this on News Nation before, in March, he asked me, and I said, just release what you have verified. And for example, if somebody went on a plane to the Caribbean with Epstein, you got to release it. Because the manifest is there, you verified it, you got to put it out. But if it's just some schmo sitting in a meeting of 8 people in the 21 Club in Manhattan, you got to be careful with that, because the climate we live in, the vigilantes will try to destroy you if they don't like you or your family. And then when I finished the conversation, he goes, yeah, I think that's what we'll do. We'll get everything out. And then it never happened. And I don't know why. I just don't know why.
Now, I think we can all speculate on why President Trump doesn't want these files released. I'm sure that there are names in there that he knows, that he understands, and that he's trying to protect. And one person that I do believe that talks about President Trump's innocence, that had a lot of contact with the victims, was Marjorie Taylor Greene, who had an opportunity to talk to a bunch of the victims. And this is what she said.
Are you suggesting there's something in the Epstein files that President Trump does not want Americans to see?
Well, I think that's the part that has so many people confused, is that the women themselves that I have talked to have over and over again said that Donald Trump did nothing wrong. Quite a few of them even told me they voted for him. And those are the women I would like to see in the Oval Office with support. I would like to see all of the women there with support.
Look, I think she's absolutely right, but only time will tell if President Trump is guilty or if there's anything in there that's really damning or incriminating for him. But we are all still miffed on why President Trump didn't just release these before. Now he's agreeing to release these files, but he should have done that a long time ago. At this point, this story has become so big that it's taken away from anything else that the government is doing. Instead of passing bills, instead of passing legislation, Congress is concerned with this. And I get it. I understand that anybody that hurts kids should be put in prison, and even a lot worse than that. But right now, this story is consuming everything else, and our politicians are not doing anything besides talk about this. Get out there and pass bills. Get out there and do something for the American people so that we're not paying so much at the grocery stores. Laws need to be passed. Get back to work. So let's go ahead and move on to our next story, which is ICE. It is being reported that last month's raid in Chicago didn't necessarily net what the government was expecting. A lot of the people that they arrested didn't have the criminal records they expected them to have. Now, they did confirm that they arrested a couple of Venezuelan gang members, but a bulk of the people didn't have criminal records. Now, I've got to give you my opinion on this. I got to make a point on this, right? If they went into these Chicago projects and they found 2, 3, 4, 5 gang members, Venezuelan gang members, right, who were dangerous. And in the process, they arrested another 50 people that were undocumented, didn't have legal status in the United States. Then that doesn't necessarily mean that the operation was a failure. It was still a success. They've got several gang members. In addition to that, they got a bunch of people that were in this country without legal status. So I don't understand how the media continues to report that these operations are a failure. And I'll reiterate this when it comes to these criminal records for these people that were detained or people that were arrested. The media does not have access to those criminal records. If they wanted to, they could have access to those records. All they would have to do is travel back to these countries and get these criminal records, because these criminal records are also public. So if the media really wanted to report on these arrests and validate that ICE is taking people that don't have any type of criminal history or violent history, all they would have to do is go back to these countries and get these reports and then publish them, and then make ICE look terrible if that were the case. But if ICE is going in there and they're taking 40, 50 people that are undocumented or don't have legal status in this country, that operation is not necessarily a failure. It's still a success. Now, I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with the tactics that ICE is using, but I understand exactly where they're coming from. Remember, there's a 1,000% increase in violence against ICE agents right now. And now, if these mayors in these cities like New York, like Chicago, actually let ICE in there, then we wouldn't have all these things that are going on right now, these heavy raids. I think these cities need to take a page from San Francisco's playbook. The city officials in San Francisco reached out to the Trump administration and said, listen, let us try our tactics first. Let us use local law enforcement to get these guys to you. We will collect these guys up and we will turn them over to you. And the Trump administration said, you know what? You got it. Let us see results and we'll keep our hands out of there. The mayor in Houston also did the same thing. And the results are astronomical. Take a look at this.
Chicago's been an issue. I know you're well aware of it. We just put up some numbers from Houston, Texas. I just want to go back to that because during the government shutdown, this did not get a lot of attention. The numbers, however, are staggering, all right? The mayor in Charlotte's a Democrat. The mayor in Houston's a Democrat. Is the mayor in Charlotte cooperating? Or are we seeing numbers the way we are in Houston because there is cooperation from that mayor in Texas?
No, what happened in Houston was a fantastic operation. I actually went out there and kicked that operation off. And I mean, the first day, I can't tell you how many child rapists. I mean, the worst of the worst to me is a child rapist. How many of them we arrested the first day? I think 9 were arrested the first day.
So once again, if these mayors in cities like New York and Chicago don't want Tom Homan to continue flooding the zone, then what they need to do is let ICE in there or conduct operations on your own and show your results. It's now being reported that New York City is going to look to San Francisco and Houston to see what they're doing and adopt something similar as well. You know, I read this story and I want to make sure that I point this out to you guys. The Catholic bishops have also come out and spoke out against ICE. This is what they said.
This is the first time in 12 years that the U.S. Council of Bishops has decided to issue a unified statement in support of immigrants. They called the ICE raids indiscriminate and aggressive. The bishops also said they are praying for the end to the dehumanization as well as violence against immigrants and law enforcement.
You know, I got to be honest with you. I mean, if I were the Catholic bishops, they are for keeping the family together, right? Not separating the family, deporting half the family and then keeping the other half here. So I completely understand where the bishops are coming from. But unfortunately, the law is the law, and that has to be enforced. If we were not a nation of laws, there would be anarchy everywhere. But once again, I'll say what I said before. I just don't understand how these ICE agents even have the patience that they have. The increase in the severity of the tactics that they are using has to do with the amount of violence that's being waged against them whenever they conduct these operations. The latest thing that's happening now is that everybody's breaking out whistles and warning everybody around them when ICE is in the area. Take a listen to this. I have to say, I believe myself to be somewhat of a patient person. I don't know if I could take those whistles blowing in my ear, the way that they're blowing those things, and people yelling at you and just saying those types of things right to your face. I don't know if I have the patience to go through all of that and not punch somebody in the face. It's tough. But while people are doing those things to ICE agents, the ICE agents are out there capturing people like this.
It's arrested this illegal migrant truck driver from Uzbekistan, saying he is wanted in his native country for distributing propaganda and recruiting terrorists. Agents arresting him while he was driving an 18-wheeler in Kansas. Pennsylvania issued him a commercial driver's license after the Biden administration let him in more than 2 years ago.
Now I'm going to reiterate what they said. This was a result of the catch and release policy of the previous administration. Remember what President Trump's policy was. His policy was remain in Mexico. That means if you were caught, you would stay in Mexico until the whole process was completed. Joe Biden's policy was completely different. You come into the country, we catch you, and then we release you. Now, releasing people was happening very, very quickly because they didn't want to create a backlog. So as soon as they caught people, they wouldn't be properly vetted. They would tell you that they were properly vetted, but they weren't. And then they would release them into the community, which is absolutely absurd. This is why we have an issue in this country. That is why we have so many people doing so many crazy things that aren't even supposed to be in this country. Do you guys remember this story?
Circulating online shows the shocking view from inside a semi as a minivan slams into the trailer and wedges underneath. Troopers say that driver, 28-year-old Harjinder Singh, had just made an illegal U-turn cutting across the Florida Turnpike in Fort Pierce last Tuesday. The move left his big rig blocking all northbound lanes. The minivan had no time to brake. All 3 people inside from Broward and Miami-Dade counties were killed.
So when it comes to what ICE is doing in this country, listen, I'm not saying that I agree with their tactics, but if you guys take a look at some of these violent videos where they're being attacked, their vehicles are being rammed, people are throwing things at them, they're spraying tear gas at them. All they're doing is returning the same amount of violence back at those people. And like I've told you guys in the past, attacking a federal agent, a federal law enforcement officer, is only going to get you in jail. So don't do it. I understand if you want to warn people as long as you don't obstruct. But when it comes to attacking these agents, you're making a fatal mistake. You're making a really big mistake. And once again, if we don't like the policies of ICE, if we don't like the immigration enforcement operations that are taking place in this country right now, go to your congressman and let them know that. Vote them out. If you don't like the immigration policies, vote them out. That's the only way to do it. But I'll tell you what, they're not going to touch it. Touching immigration policy is political suicide in this country. No congressman, no senator is going to touch it. That's why President Trump understood that the only way to secure the border was not to pass legislation. It was to take matters into his own hands and secure the border himself. Okay, guys, those are the stories for today. I hope you enjoyed them. Like, subscribe, share. Until next time, stay balanced.